My parents worked multiple jobs just to scrape together enough for my college tuition, and I knew I couldn't afford to mess up this opportunity. When I started my second year of college, I was relieved to finally have roommates who respected boundaries and kept things clean. My first year dorm had been a nightmare. The building was falling apart, pipes leaked constantly, and mold was growing on the walls. When they finally decided to renovate the entire building, all of us got relocated to different dorms. I was nervous about the change, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My new roommates were quiet, responsible people who did their dishes, paid their share of utilities on time, and didn't blast music at all hours. For someone like me who needs peace and quiet to study, it was perfect. The first 2 months were honestly some of the best I'd had in college. I could focus on my coursework without worrying about cleaning up after messy roommates or dealing with loud parties. My grades were improving, and I was finally starting to feel like I might actually make it through college without any major disasters. Then she moved in. She was part of my friend group, though we weren't particularly close. She was loud, always laughing at something, and had this energy that could fill up an entire room. While I appreciated her when she was a friend, living with her was a completely different story. She never did her assigned chores on time, leaving dirty dishes in the sink for days and letting trash pile up until someone else dealt with it. But the worst part was her complete disregard for our dorm's curfew policy. We were supposed to be inside by 11 p.m., but she regularly came home at 2 or 3 in the morning, banging on the door and demanding to be let in. She'd wake up all of us, stumbling around in the dark and making noise when she got ready for bed. When we tried to talk to her about it, she'd just laugh it off and promise to be more careful next time. But nothing ever changed. Still, I tried to be understanding. She was my friend, and I didn't want to cause problems in our social circle. I kept telling myself that her behavior was just a phase, that she'd eventually settle into the routine like the rest of us. I convinced myself that I could deal with the inconvenience when our friendship remained intact. Then I started noticing my money disappearing. At first, I thought I was just being careless with my spending. Maybe I bought lunch a few extra times that week or picked up some school supplies I'd forgotten about. But when I sat down to create a proper budget, the numbers didn't add up. I was tracking every purchase, every meal, every small expense, and still coming up short at the end of each week. That's when I realized someone was stealing from me. I didn't want to believe it at first. The idea that one of my roommates would go through my things felt like a betrayal of the trust we'd built, but the evidence was undeniable. Money was disappearing from my purse even when I was careful to keep it locked away in my room. I decided to install a small camera in my room. It felt wrong, like I was violating the privacy of my living space, but I needed to know who was taking my money. I positioned it so it would capture anyone going through my belongings while I was at class. 2 weeks later, I had my answer. I watched the footage when she crept into my room like she owned the place. She went straight to my wardrobe, pulled out my purse, and casually took out several bills. $10 might not sound like much to someone with a comfortable family income, but for me, it represented meals for 2 days or a textbook I desperately needed for class. The betrayal hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the fact that someone I considered a friend was stealing from me while I slept. How long had this been going on? How much had she taken before I'd even noticed? I'm not a confrontational person. The thought of having a direct argument with her made my stomach turn. But I also couldn't just let her keep stealing from me. I needed that money for basic necessities, and she was treating it like her personal piggy bank. That's when I came up with my plan. If she was going to steal from me, I'd even the score by taking some of her belongings and selling them. I told myself it wasn't really stealing since I was just recovering what she'd taken from me. She had so many clothes and possessions scattered around her messy room that she'd never notice a few missing items. I started small. A blouse here, a pair of shoes there. Most of the things I took still had tags on them, expensive items she'd bought but never worn. Her room was such a disaster that she couldn't keep track of what she actually owned. Clothes were piled on every surface, makeup scattered across her desk, and accessories thrown into random drawers. This went on for 8 months. Every time I caught her on camera taking money from my purse, I calculate the amount and then find something of equivalent value to sell. By my count, she'd stolen about $200 from me over that time. I'd sold 3 blouses, 6 dresses, 4 pairs of pants, 4 pairs of shoes, some expensive art supplies, and even her ukulele. Most of these were brand name items that she clearly spent good money on, but they just sat unused in her chaotic room. The whole situation was starting to weigh on me. I felt guilty about taking her things, even though I knew she was stealing from me. I kept telling myself that I'd stop when she stopped, that this was just temporary until I could figure out a better solution. Then one day I came back to my room early and found her trying on my clothes. I was shocked. Not only was she stealing my money, but now she was going through my personal belongings like she had every right to be there. That was my breaking point. I immediately called her from outside my room and told her I could see her in my room and demanded that she get out immediately. The line went quiet for a moment, then I heard rustling and movement. I told her again that I was serious and that I could see her through my window. She didn't respond, but I heard my room door slam shut. When I got upstairs, she had locked herself in her own room and wouldn't come out. I went into my room to assess the damage, but she was already gone. A few hours later, her mother showed up at our dorm. She looked stressed and confused when she started packing up her daughter's belongings. My other roommates were curious about what was happening and asked if she was okay and why she was moving out so suddenly. Her mother explained that she had come home crying and begging to move out, but wouldn't tell her why. She said her daughter had just kept saying she couldn't stay there anymore. When my roommates asked if something had happened and said they thought everything was fine, her mother said she had no idea. She mentioned that her daughter had been acting strange for months, but that day she was completely hysterical and wouldn't explain what was wrong. I stayed quiet during this conversation, helping where I could but not volunteering any information. I figured if she wanted to tell her mother about the stealing, that was her choice, but I wasn't going to cover for her behavior or make excuses. After that day, she completely disappeared from my life. She stopped coming to friend group gatherings, didn't respond to messages, and seemed to avoid any place where she might run into me. Several months later, there was a party thrown by someone in our friend group. I was having a good time catching up with people I hadn't seen in a while when she suddenly appeared in front of me. Her face was full of anger, and she was practically shaking with rage. She shouted at me about how I dared to sell her dress. I genuinely had no idea what she was talking about at first. I'd sold so many of her things over those 8 months that I couldn't remember every specific item. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. She then accused me of selling her grandmother's dress, the one her grandmother had given her before she died. She said I had no right to do that. Now I was getting angry too. After months of stealing from me, she had the nerve to act like she was the victim. I told her that between the two of us, I was the one who had proof of theft. I explained that I had her on camera taking money from my purse multiple times over 8 months. I said if she wanted to cause a scene and accuse me of being a robber, we could settle this in court. Her face went pale. She clearly hadn't expected me to have evidence of her stealing. She stood there for a moment, opening and closing her mouth like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. She asked me if I had been recording her. I explained that I was recording my own room because someone was stealing from me, and I had caught her red-handed. She turned around and walked away without another word. I haven't seen her since that night. This whole mess started about a year ago when my wife and I decided to plant some trees along our property line. We live on a corner lot, and the long side of our property is pretty open to the street. After getting permission from the city, we planted several small trees along the nature strip to eventually provide some privacy and shade. They've been in the ground for about 12 months now and are just starting to get established. Nothing fancy, just trying to make our little corner of the neighborhood look nicer. The trouble started when this young guy who lives across the street bought himself a massive Ram 3500 truck. I don't know his real name, but given his attitude, I'll call him Chad. This truck is absolutely huge, the kind that barely fits in a standard parking space and towers over every other vehicle on the block. For whatever reason, Chad decided he didn't want to park this monster in front of his own house. Maybe it blocks his view or makes it hard for other people to park near him. Instead, he chose to park it along our long property line right across from his front door. The problem isn't just that he's parking there, it's that he's parking on the wrong side of the road and keeps opening his driver door directly into our young trees. These trees are still fragile and trying to establish their root systems. Every time Chad slams his door into them, it damages the bark and breaks small branches. My wife loves gardening and was getting really upset watching our hard work get destroyed by this guy's carelessness. So my wife came up with a solution. She used to park her car in our garage, but she started parking it on the street right next to the trees instead. This way, Chad couldn't park his truck there and damage them. It was a simple fix that protected our investment without causing any confrontation. But Chad didn't like this arrangement one bit. He started getting petty about the whole thing. One day, we needed to run an errand in my wife's car. When we came outside, Chad had parked his truck nose to nose with her car, making it difficult to get out. We managed to squeeze out anyway and drove off to pick up what we needed. At the end of our street, we realized we'd forgotten something important back at the house. We turned around and drove back. The whole trip took maybe 2 minutes. In that tiny window of time, Chad had apparently been watching from his window. He ran out of his house, started up his truck, and moved it exactly 1 car length down to where my wife's car had been parked. Then he opened his door right into the small tree again before running back inside his house. We were in a rush and didn't want to start a fight, so we just grabbed what we needed and left again. But this little incident showed us exactly what kind of person we were dealing with. Chad was clearly angry and petty about not being able to park his massive truck wherever and however he wanted. Yesterday afternoon, things finally came to a head. My wife was out mowing the lawn, which she really enjoys doing. She handles all the garden work around our house while I take care of the other handyman projects. It's an arrangement that works well for both of us. She had already finished most of the front lawn and was working on the nature strip when Chad pulled up in his truck. He parked nose to nose with my wife's car, got out, and left his driver door wide open. Then he walked around to the back of his truck to fiddle with his jet ski that he keeps parked on the street behind the truck. Now, our lawnmower doesn't throw grass clippings everywhere. It doesn't have a catcher, but it doesn't have a thrower either. The grass just gets cut and drops straight down under the blades. There's barely any grass on the roadside of the curb because of how the mower works. My wife stood there waiting with the mower running, hoping Chad would close his door so she could finish the nature strip. She waited and waited. Chad could clearly see her standing there with the mower, but he kept his door open for a full 5 minutes while he messed around with his jet ski. Finally, my wife gave up waiting. The mower wasn't going to throw grass into his truck, and he was parked far enough from the curb that she thought it would be safe to mow past his open door. She was wrong about Chad's reaction, but she was right about the grass. The moment she started mowing past his truck, Chad exploded. He started yelling at the top of his lungs about how this was Texas in America, demanding to know why she couldn't wait 2 minutes before kicking grass into his truck. He went on and on about how things were done differently here and how we needed to learn American ways. I should mention that my wife is American and I'm Australian. We have a blended Australian and US flag in front of our house, but Chad apparently thinks we're from Russia or something foreign and threatening. He kept ranting about how we people needed to learn how things worked in this country. He was absolutely furious and spitting mad. My wife called me outside and then walked away to get the edge trimmer. She's not one for confrontation and didn't want to escalate things further. When I came out, Chad was still ranting and raving. I listened for about 30 seconds before I'd had enough of his nonsense. I just turned away, restarted the lawnmower, and ignored him completely. That's when Chad really lost it. He yelled that he was calling the police and that we'd see how they handled this kind of disrespect around here. I told him to go right ahead and moved away to continue mowing while Chad walked back to his house to make his phone call. Honestly, I was curious to see what the police would make of this ridiculous situation. When the officer arrived about 20 minutes later, he was clearly trying to maintain his professional demeanor while fighting back laughter. The whole situation was so absurd that even a trained police officer couldn't keep a straight face. The officer asked Chad to explain the situation, and Chad told him that my wife had deliberately thrown grass into his truck and demanded to see the mess she'd made. The officer walked over to examine Chad's truck and found that there wasn't a single blade of grass inside it. Not one. The officer pointed out that he didn't see any grass in the vehicle. Chad insisted that there would have been if he hadn't moved fast enough, which made the officer look even more skeptical. My wife came over to talk to the officer and asked an innocent question about whether she should have just pushed his door shut so she could mow safely. The officer actually laughed out loud at that and told her it was better not to do that or Chad might call him out again, reporting that she was trying to steal his truck. We chatted with the officer for a few more minutes. He was actually pretty friendly once he realized how ridiculous the whole situation was. During our conversation, he noticed Chad's jet ski sitting unlocked behind his truck and mentioned that Chad must be pretty naive since there had been some vehicle thefts in the area lately. He explained that an unlocked jet ski with a trailer hitch was a very easy target for thieves. Then the officer took a closer look at how Chad had parked his truck. He noted that Chad was parked on the wrong side of the road and said he'd need to issue him a warning to park properly in the future. Chad's face went pale when he heard that. Apparently, his righteous indignation about American values didn't extend to following basic traffic laws. The officer thanked us for our time and headed back to his car. When he walked away, I could see him shaking his head and chuckling to himself over the silly call-out. After the officer left, my wife and I went back inside. It was perfect timing because our new security cameras had arrived that same day. We'd ordered them a few weeks earlier after Chad's behavior started escalating, and now we had even more reason to install them quickly. These cameras record both video and audio, which should give us plenty of evidence if Chad tries to cause more trouble. We've decided that if any of this happens again, we'll be taking out a restraining order against him using the camera footage as proof of his hostile attitude. I'm pretty sure Chad left his door open deliberately yesterday, hoping to create a situation he could escalate. He's clearly angry that my wife's car is parked right where he wants his truck to be. He was itching for any excuse to cause a fuss and feel justified about his behavior. The whole thing is just so petty and ridiculous. All we wanted was to plant some trees and keep them healthy. Instead, we've got an entitled neighbor who thinks he owns the entire street and can park wherever he wants while damaging other people's property. But at least now we know the police think he's just as ridiculous as we do. And with our new security cameras going up, Chad better think twice before his next tantrum. I need to tell you about my younger sister first. She's 10 years younger than me, and when she was little, she had really bad social anxiety. My parents were amazing about it though. They got her into therapy right away, and over the years she got so much better. Now she is completely normal most of the time. Around family and friends, she's super talkative and funny. She just gets a bit shy around strangers, which is totally normal. The only times her old anxiety really kicks in is when she has to speak in public or when strangers get confrontational with her. That's going to be important for this story. 2 years ago, I came back home after being out of the country for several months. My sister had just turned 18 and had a birthday a few weeks earlier, so I decided to take her shopping as a belated birthday present. She's incredibly talented at art, and at that time she was going through this phase where she thought artists were supposed to dress really classy and professional. When I picked her up, she was wearing gray trousers, a white shirt, and a vest. She looked like she was heading to a business meeting or something, very official and put together. We went shopping, and she mostly wanted painting supplies. On our way home, I remembered I needed some stuff for a hiking trip I was planning with my friends, so I stopped at this big hardware store. She came inside with me and wandered off to look at other things while I gathered what I needed. I finished up in about 10 minutes and started pushing my cart toward the registers, looking around for my sister. That's when I heard this guy absolutely screaming at someone. He was going on about how incompetent they were and threatening to get them fired. Lots of swearing and just general nastiness. Normally, I'm the type of person who would step in and defend a poor employee getting yelled at like that. But I was really tired from traveling and honestly didn't feel like dealing with some angry customer. I figured I'd just find my sister and get out of there. But when I was walking past the aisle where all the shouting was happening, I realized something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't an employee getting screamed at, it was my sister. This guy looked absolutely ridiculous, like someone had dressed an extra from Mad Max in a business suit. He was holding my sister by the arm and shouting profanities right in her face. She looked absolutely terrified and was on the verge of tears. I immediately went into protective brother mode. I sprinted across those 10 meters and shoved the guy away from my sister hard. I yelled at him to leave her alone. He let go of her and looked completely shocked at first. Then he got aggressive and started demanding to know who I thought I was. He started shoving me back, but I'm much heavier and taller than him. I wrestled him to the ground where he just kept screaming incomprehensibly. By this point, all the commotion had attracted an employee who quickly called both a manager and security. I explained what I had witnessed. The guy calmed down a bit once security arrived, so I let him get up. He immediately started ranting about how he was going to sue all of us, but he didn't try to get physical again. The manager called the police, who took statements from everyone, including my sister, who was finally able to speak normally again. They also reviewed the security camera footage. Here's what actually happened before I got involved. My sister was looking at some electronics and noticed that some headphones had fallen off the shelf. Being the helpful person she is, she started putting them back. This guy saw her doing this, and because she was dressed in those official-looking clothes, he assumed she was an employee or manager. He stood beside her waiting for her to finish so he could get her attention. My sister was focused on what she was doing and didn't realize he wanted something from her, so she just blocked him out. After a while, the guy got visibly annoyed. He grabbed her by the shoulder and completely flipped out on her. He screamed at her about how unprofessional she was and what kind of terrible service this was. My sister, being shy around confrontational strangers, was shocked and started stuttering. She couldn't get the words out to explain that she didn't actually work there. This just made him angrier and more aggressive. Then he actually slapped her. It wasn't super hard, more like the kind of slap you'd give someone to wake them up, but still completely unacceptable. That's when I showed up. The police cuffed the guy, much to his complete surprise. He kept asking them what they were doing and demanding to know why they weren't arresting me instead, since he claimed I had attacked him. He genuinely couldn't comprehend that grabbing my sister's arm and slapping her wasn't okay. The cognitive dissonance was unreal. Later, he was charged with assault. He ended up getting probation, a couple hundred hours of community service, and had to attend anger management therapy. We didn't really care about the specific punishment, we just wanted him to face what he deserved for his actions. The store manager apologized profusely, even though we didn't blame the store at all. It wasn't their fault some psycho customer couldn't tell the difference between an employee and another customer. They gave us some vouchers. My sister was pretty shaken up by the whole thing, but physically she was okay except for a small bruise on her arm from where he had grabbed her. She bounced back pretty quickly once we got home and she could process what happened. The whole thing was just so absurd. This guy saw someone in business casual clothes in a store and immediately assumed they worked there. When his assumption was wrong, instead of just apologizing for the mistake, he doubled down and got violent.